Welcome back to the video series, Sea Level Rising. I'm your host and guide, Paul Enns. On this episode, we're going to cover 3 topics. First, a short historical overview of Olympia. Secondly, a science summary of why sea level is rising and the Port Peninsula is sinking. And finally, how climate change is affecting our local weather and its contribution to flooding. Olympia started as a port community on the estuary of the Deschutes River. Water transport was essential. Bud Bay was dredged to allow ships to access the waterfront. That dredging became the landfill, which is now called the Port Peninsula. As the city grew, the capital was built. Bridges were built, roads expanded, and the port aspect of the city slowly diminished. The city of Olympia evolved into the metropolis it is now. Now we're standing in Heritage Park, home of Lake Fair. Many folks enjoy the park and the pathways around the lake. But this area has had floods on a regular basis, as you can see by these photos. When there are heavy rainfalls, the river and lake cannot pass all the water into Bud Bay because of rising tides and sea levels. The city of Olympia has implemented backflow gates to prevent water backing up out of storm drains from Capitol Lake and Bud Inlet. Welcome, Wayne. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Wayne Olsen, now retired and living at Panorama in Lacey, and I'm a 4th generation Olympian. One set of my great-grandparents settled in the Olympia area in 1889. Received a Bachelor of Science degree from U.S. Naval Academy, that's Annapolis, Maryland, and a master's degree from Scripps Institution of Oceanography, specializing in physical oceanography.
And then what is your background in weather and climate change?
26 of my 30 years as a Navy officer career were as an oceanographer and meteorologist, providing forecast support to keep our naval forces out of harm's way and to optimize their missions by using the environment to their advantage. After Navy retirement, I then taught oceanography and atmospheric science, including climate change courses at Pierce College for a number of years.
Why do you believe in global warming?
Scientific evidence is overwhelming. I have to admit I was somewhat of an agnostic about global warming in the 1990s. The more I studied, the more I was concerned that climate change is real, human-caused, and that it is a threat to our very survival. No other explanation comes close to fitting the evidence so neatly.
Wayne, why do you care about global warming?
I have 5 grandkids. I worry about the kind of world that we are leaving behind for them and for their future grandkids. We have the tools and the knowledge now to solve the climate crisis, but apparently not the political will.
What's the difference between climate and weather?
Weather is the day-to-day atmospheric events that we observe all the time. Temperature, humidity, precipitation, clouds, at specific locations at specific times. Climate is just the average of all those over some extended period of time. And that extended period of time normally is about 30 years of accumulated data and averaged.
And then how does climate change cause sea levels to rise?
There are 2 means by which climate change causes sea level to rise, 2 main ones. First one is expansion of the ocean water as it warms and melting of the polar ice caps and continental glaciers.
You mentioned water expanding. Why does warmer water expand?
When heat is added, they get excited. They start moving around. You can think of it as that. And there are more collisions. They just need more space. They try to move out. And over 90% of the heat being trapped by greenhouse gases ends up being stored in the oceans, raising the water temperature and sea level.
I understand the Arctic Ocean's sea ice is melting. Do the floating icebergs melting add to sea level rise?
Individual icebergs do not add to the sea level rise.
What about our glaciers and our snowpack on our local mountains melting?
See by the example of Mount Rainier behind us that has lost about 30% or more of its glacial cover in the last 100 years or so.
Moving a little bit closer locally, what's the current rate of sea level rise in Bud Bay?
Taking all factors together, Olympia's current rate of sea level rise is about 0.15 of an inch per year.
So land subsidence is very basically the lowering of the land surface, and it can be caused by a number of different things. In this area, there's several things that interplay to cause land subsidence, and what we're sitting on here is fill, and much of this fill came from dredging of the channels either side of us, because a lot of sediment comes down the Deschutes River to my left and Moxley Creek, a little bit less. And so over time, we've had, in order to keep the channels open, dredge those, and the resulting dredge spoils from downtown Olympia, and that's what the port's built on. There are pore spaces between the different particles, and they hold water. So that's, when that water gets drained out, that can cause the land to subside. We need to keep in mind, in terms of what sort of events might cause subsidence, would be the earthquakes that we've had in the past and will likely continue to have. The other thing is liquefaction. Is that something else we need to consider here? We've had evidence of that in the past also. And in a place where you have fill that hasn't been, or maybe not adequately consolidated, or I shouldn't say adequately, but not fully consolidated, that sits on naturally placed sediment that also may not be fully consolidated, and then you shake it in an earthquake, you can cause what's called lateral spreading, which results in subsidence too, sort of a broadening of the land, but also a lowering. But often pumping groundwater out of some kind of subsurface layer can cause subsidence again when those pores collapse because the water is no longer filling the pores.
For example, the full tidal range at Olympia is really about 18 feet.
So why do we have extreme tides in southern Puget Sound?
To answer that, let's take a look at the components that cause tides. So as the Earth rotates 24 hours a day, those tidal bulges move across the Earth's surface. Olympia, being at the end of Puget Sound, results in a much higher tidal range than other locations closer to the ocean entrance. The funneling effect, as this tidal swirling going around the ocean basins essentially ends up in a funnel and ending up at the end at Olympia while we have the highest tides. You can think of this tidal range of as the tides move around the ocean basins like swirling of forces in your coffee cup, in which then you have the higher tides around the edges, and in the center there's not much tidal range at all.
King tides.
King tides are when the Earth is at its closest point to the sun, which is about 91 million miles. That occurs in our wintertime period, December, January. Actually, the sun exerts more tidal pull, more gravitational effect on the moon. So we have higher tides at that point of the year than we have during the summertime.
You've been speaking of various factors that affect the tide levels. Does the wind affect tide levels?
For example, for the Puget Sound and into the Bud Bay Inlet, we'll see some effects from the wind if we have a strong northerly wind pushing water, additional water besides all the tidal changes into the southern Puget Sound area.
How does climate change affect weather?
The answer is innumerable ways. In general, then, the future climate changes as the temperature goes up, including snow levels in the mountains, the ups and down arrows as you see on that graphic. More and heavier precipitation in the winter, because what we can expect, and less precipitation in the spring and summer. We'll also probably see more flooding in late fall and early spring, and more drought in summer and longer summer periods. And as we've been discussing, that sea levels will be rising slowly but measurably.
How does climate change affect river and lake flooding?
With climate changing and more frequent atmospheric rivers in the late fall and winter, we can expect somewhere around 16% higher winter stream flow in the next few decades. That would undoubtedly result eventually in a few episodes of the Deschutes River flooding annually, which will add then to the risk of Capitol Lake overflowing into downtown Olympia as it occurs, if it occurs during those high tide periods, the spring and the king tides.
And would you tell us how rain affects snowpack?
We've been seeing this type of event occurring in the last decade or so, being warm rain. When it lands on a recent snow event, it's able to melt that snow just that much faster.
What about more intense rainstorms, more rain happening in a shorter amount of time?
Yes, we'll see those as particular. Anytime we have warmer atmosphere, more potential for thunderstorms, for example, individual events, those is when our heaviest rainfalls can occur.
Wayne, thank you for your time today. I definitely learned some new things. Global warming causes the sea levels to rise. How much, by when? Who knows? The land of Port Peninsula is sinking. More intense storms are coming. 100-year tide events will happen more often. On the next episode, we'll explore the service, buildings, and businesses in downtown Olympia that are at risk and determine how vulnerable they are. Till then, stay safe and stay dry.